Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of Friday Morning at the Fun House alongside you know who, Mr. Martin Popoff. What's going on, Martin?
Yes. Morning, sir. Morning. Well, a lot of chaos is going on, I suppose. This is going to
Yeah,
be a strange, chaotic show of show and tell again, but we have some tighter themes coming, kind of thing. There's going to be a little overlap here, overlap with past shows, overlap with these categories. But anyways, fall has arrived up here in Canada. It's freezing cold. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. We'll get through it.
it's fall like here, but then I see we're going to have some temps in the upper 80s and low 90s like over the next week or week and a half. So yeah, summer's not
Oh yeah.
not willing to go away fully yet. And yes, this will be a little bit of a chaotic show. It's kind of like a sort of a loose continuation of last week's show. This one is called In Name Only albums, right? So these are the albums that it's got the name of the big band on them, but our point is like, are they really a true representation of what that band is all about? Could it, is there some weird stuff going on? Stylistically, could some of these have been solo albums by one member of the band? And we got all sorts of categories and weirdnesses to talk about today. And there's going to be probably a lot of albums we mentioned today that maybe some of you have even never even listened to or heard of or cast aside or disregarded or ignored or whatever the term might be. So, we'll have Martin kick us off with our first category, and then we'll kind of work our way through all. We got a lot of them, so strap yourselves in, grab a cold drink, everybody, and bear with us.
Yeah, so the categories are a little nebulous here, and some of these fall under, like, we had kind of an umbrella idea of we're putting together a ranking show. What do we include? What gets included, what doesn't? You have to have that conversation, that debate right off the bat. This particular category, yeah, it might mix a few of those in. But let's get started with the whole idea of these you know greatly compromised lineup situations. You got the one album, Ray Wilson. You got the one album without the typical lead singer. Does this one fit as a Genesis album? When it's so isolated down to one album, and maybe it doesn't even sound that much like the band. You think of Motley Crue with the Motley Crue album as well in there. You've got your Black Sabbath Seventh Star, which is, should have that have been, was it going to be a solo album, that sort of thing. Does it fit within the sound of this band? You got your Nazareth Surviving the Law, the whole Nazareth situation without Dan. I mean, do you feel like these are actually Nazareth albums? I find they're actually grittier and kind of heavier and more roughshod too. So they don't fit, sort of, even though the producers, I guess it's Jan Roulé, is still continuing to work with them, I think. But the whole idea is that even the sound is different, and you've got Carl Sentence in singing on these records. You've got Triumph, Edge of Excess. You've got your sort of late period Triumph album that happens without Rick Emmett on it. Phil X, it's a little heavier. You've got Humble Pie, missing members. I actually like this album quite a bit. I'm not a big Humble Pie guy, but this is actually one of the albums I play a lot, believe it or not. You've got the whole complicated Molly Hatchet situation. Which of these are legitimate Molly Hatchet albums? Members keep dying left and right. They have to keep changing members all the time. How does it relate to the earlier sound? Which is the legendary sound? I mean, I like these later albums later. There's another one of these. You've got the Foreigner Can't Slow Down album, the only one without, well, actually not the only one without Lou Gramm, but yeah, different singer. The lineup's very compromised. They got lots and lots of members of the band. Now even Mick doesn't even play live with them
No,
sometimes, right?
farewell tour without the original guy, right? It's like,
Yeah, yeah. You've got the whole Blackfoot situation. Which of these do you include in the Blackfoot catalog? These late period albums. This is more like a Ricky Medlock sort of album. You've got Rick Medlock and Blackfoot. You've got this notorious thing here where it's just, Ricky just gets a bunch of young guys and says, "We're going to call you Blackfoot."
but I'm not going to be on it. I'll produce the album, but
Yeah,
I'm no part of it. And they toured
yeah,
that
he
way
got
too. Yeah.
he got a lot of heck for that.
Yeah.
You've got the likes of Fleetwood Mac, Time, Dave Mason. You've got Boston, Life, Love, and Hope. You've got these later records where you're missing, for the they're a collective sort of thing. You're missing the iconic Brad Delp is on and off these albums sort of later on. You've got Richie Blackmore's Rainbow Stranger in Us All, which is again the idea of first off, it's got the extended name that they used on the first one. It's an isolated hanging out there way late after the run of albums, and you've got Doogie singing on the thing. So does it really fit in the Rainbow catalog? When this whole idea of when you do these rankings, you grudgingly include that album, right? You're like ticked off when you have to include it, right? Because it's again back to our sort of messy catalogs. Episode. The Doors with Full Circle and Other Voices, right? You've got this album here and this album here, and even American Prayer, which says music by the Doors, and sometimes you see that listed as a Doors album. But yeah, these are apparently there's one guy missing out of the band that's fairly important.
Yeah, I wonder who that is.
I'm not sure who it is, but they're a trio here. I think they were better with four guys, and the other guys fairly important in this band. So yeah, those are some very notoriously bad albums as well, or considered quite bad pretty much by anybody. And Guns N' Roses Chinese Democracy, you never know whether to include that or not in the catalog, right? It's just you just Axl and a couple of guys, but it's missing the whole rest of them. Spaghetti Incident is that's another problem one for another category. But so there's the first category. The whole, I mean, these are in name only albums because they are named with the name of the band. But yeah, you don't know whether you include these in the catalog. There you go.
Yeah, and then you mentioned Doogie White before, so not only did he hold that distinction of kind of being that new face in this new Richie Blackmore's Rainbow, and like, is it legit? Now he's doing it in Alcatraz, right? So he's replaced Graham Bonnet in Alcatraz. Gee, Graham Bonnet, Rainbow, oh boy, how the circle keeps going around, right? So now you're left, is this really legitimately Alcatraz? Can it be Alcatraz without Graham Bonnet? And a late one that I thought about is the Electric Light Orchestra. Now all of a sudden you got Electric Light Orchestra, like the Zoom album from a number of years ago, and he's still putting them out, which basically there's no orchestra, right? It's just Jeff Lynne. And then they did the Electric Light Orchestra Part 2, which again doesn't include Jeff Lynne. So how do these fit in the whole catalog, right? Yeah. Don't know. It's like you're left kind of wondering and thinking, where do we put these albums, right?
Yeah, and again, thematically, you'll notice. I mean, that this is the reverse of the May As Well Be episode, right? And that's why we, that this is how this came up, because the May As Well Be episode is not in name, but they sound like the catalog, and these ones actually have the name, and maybe they shouldn't be part of the catalog, right? Which brings up a good point with Alcatraz. You've got a May As Well Be situation with the Graham Bonnet Band, because those sound like Alcatraz albums.
Absolutely, yeah.
And maybe they sound more like Alcatraz albums because of the importance of the lead singer, right? And that's kind of a theme of this first category.
Yes.
The super importance of the lead singer. I think it's different for a lot of people. If you talk to guitar players or drummers or whatever, they'd say, the lead singer's not that important, right? They're gonna lead singers LSD disease, right? Lead singer disease, right? But I know for myself, maybe it's even outsized the whole idea. Like I think I did a podcast episode of that, of History in 5 Songs as well. How important is the lead singer? It's totally important to me. It's like I say, it's literally over 50% of the band. In a lot of cases, despite how much when the band's trying to put lipstick on a pig of their situation, they'll like chat down the importance of their lead singer. It's like, no, yeah. I'll never believe it, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's not many instances of where a band had a major vocalist shakeup, right? And they get a guy in who sounds completely different to the original guy, and it works. Because in most cases it doesn't. That's why so many bands like a Foreigner, like a Journey or whoever, or a Kansas or anybody, goes out and gets a singer. Priest did it with Ripper Owens, goes out and gets a guy who sounds very similar to the original guy. That's why Blaze didn't work in Iron Maiden, right? But and weirdly enough, Ronnie James Dio worked in Black Sabbath, even though I know there's a small subset of people who never really accepted anything past the Ozzy years, but most people were on board. And that's one of the rare instances where that that whole idea worked. So.
Yeah. Like I say, I think the main reason it will work is you stick with it. You stick with it, and the guy writes, right? That's all important, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's got to be a long-term scenario type of thing.
Yeah.
All right. Our next category is albums that had a quite different style, may or may not be tied to member changes, but more about the personality of the band changed quite a bit. Like I said, even if there were or weren't lineup changes. So an instance of that is Jethro Tull A, which was, originally supposed to be a Ian Anderson solo album. But of course, the record label intervened and said, well, more people are going to buy a Jethro Tull album than a Ian Anderson solo album. And here you see a complete overhaul of the band. Only Ian and Martin Barre remain. You got Eddie Jobson joins, David Pegg joins, right? You got a new drummer as well. And this album is a complete about face to the 3 albums they did before, right? So you've got the kind of the folk prog albums. So you've got Songs from the Wood, Heavy Horses, and Stormwatch, which are all kind of tied thematically to each other. And then this comes out, and this takes them into like all sorts of, there's violin on here and all sorts of synthesizers and high-tech technology. And it's a very good album, but man, is it different, right? So here you have an example of the lineup changed and the style of the music changed drastically. You've got two albums actually for UFO. You got Misdemeanor. All right, and these are 80s albums, by the way. So here you have Phil Mogg basically totally revamping the band after they basically were kaput. And this is like a total like 80s melodic rock / hair metal album. And who would have thought UFO would ever do something like that, right? And people just didn't know what to do with this album. And on the same token, then he gets back together with Pete Way and they do High Stakes and Dangerous Men. And again, doesn't really sound all like vintage UFO, completely different lineup. But, the record label was like, we're doing that. Lynch Mob, Smoke This, right? Yeah. All of a sudden, Lynch Mob goes from that gritty blues. There it is. And what is this? Like rap metal, new metal with all new members and George. Oh my God, what happened here? Yeah. You got Attention Shoppers by Stars, which, after those first 2 really good, memorable, heavy rock records, all of a sudden now it's like they're doing like pop album, like power pop. And what happened to the hard rock and stars that we know and love? Thin Lizzy, again, a great album, but Thunder and Lightning comes out. John Sykes joins the band. This is the metal album, right? The one metal album in their whole catalog. Some people weren't on board with this. So only one member change and a completely different style. So it shows you how like one guy can completely change the face of a band. And how about like, again, this whole personality change of the band. So we've got Quartz, Against All Odds, right? Yeah. You've got, probably the poster child for this part of it is Tigers of Pantang, The Cage. Yep. So all of a sudden here you have this new wave of British heavy metal band doing this complete like poppy AOR melodic rock album. We talked about The Cage on an episode of the UK Connection. It's just like, what happened here, right? You got the Boomtown Rats, Tonic for the Troops. Sorry. Yep. And the first 2 Ram Jam albums sound completely different. You got the first is kind of a gritty, kind of like hard rock and boogie album. Right, some good songs on there, and then all of a sudden that second album is total metal, totally heavy. Yeah. Whether you like the first one more than the second one, they're both really good, but man, they're completely different. You got the band More from the first album to the second album. Yep. Jaguar first to the second. Again, there's no surprise that a bunch of these are new wave of British heavy metal bands we're talking about here. It's the Savage first 2 albums. Yep. Right, completely different from one to the next. So so sometimes it could be totally due to lineup changes, label changes, all sorts of factors can kind of happen here. But the drastic change of sound, style, and personality of the band has happened many, many times over the years. There's lots of factors that kind of can give you the reason for that. So.
Yeah, I kind of like this category because it's a little different than just a band evolving, changing their style sort of thing. I like when there's ones where you think, wow, the absolute personality of all the members seems completely different. It just seems completely like a foreign, different band. And I think you definitely get that in that Ram Jam situation. It's not like the second album's just heavier. It's recorded totally different. Their brains are just wired a completely different way. Mike's vocals are different. And the Moore situation is another one where I think I never liked that Warhead album. It's got Paul Mary O'Day on it, but then it's got this Mick Stratton, I guess, is on the second one. But again, recorded different. Just the playing is different. All the performances of the guys, it's still Kenny Cox on both of them, but that second one is a masterpiece. Blood and Thunder is so good. It's close to my favorite. It's easily, I could put it in my top 5 new wave of British heavy metal albums. Jaguar, kind of the same thing. It just doesn't sound like the same band. The first one is just this compressed, Power Games, like really kind of heavy, fast and furious, dirty sort of album. And then they try kind of a hair metal direction. Savage is kind of the same thing. And the Boomtown Rats situation, there's a lot of bands like that where you just go like, where did those hard rocking punks go kind of thing? They've completely become a pop thing. So again, it's almost like the brains are wired differently. And one that almost kicked off this category, and we kind of through all our typing, we left it off our list. But the whole Wasted situation with Save Your Prayers, right?
Yeah.
Is you listen to that thing, and it's like the charming chaoticness of Finn and Pete Way and the drunkenness and like the cool bar bandness completely gone. You get Danny Vaughn in. It's much later. They're on a major label, and it's just this really good, competent hair metal album, and it just doesn't sound anything like the same guys.
Yeah. And we didn't note them, Martin, but I'm sure people are going to bring them up in the comments. We didn't highlight Rush here, but you could make an argument that Rush, in various times in their catalog, did exactly what happens here, even though there's no member changes. But I think the priorities of some of the members changed. Some guy, you have Geddy and Neil really embracing technology, and you got Alex embracing all sorts of different guitar tones and effects, and therefore you had all these drastic musical changes within the career of Rush as well. So they kind of could fit here as well too.
Yeah. Okay. So that category wasn't particularly, we got to put together our ranking show. Do we include these albums? We know we got to include these albums. They're all in there. But this one, the next category is, and I might even done a podcast episode called Asterix albums, but this whole idea of this really is the theme of this episode. It's almost like if you listed all their albums, you'd put a little star by them because it is in question, right? So you've got this category that includes things like that over there. I mentioned this situation, Guns N' Roses. So anytime a band does a covers album, you don't know whether to include it, even if it's a studio album. It's rare, but not totally rare that bands will do a whole album. I mean, it does happen, I guess, fairly often. But again, you just don't know. Do we include this because it's not their songs? How do we talk about it? You've got strange situations like Lynyrd Skynyrd Endangered Species, which is lighter versions of their songs. You hear that happen, but it's a studio album, right? It's kind of a proper album. You get your whole recorded, is this the one, a 25th anniversary best of and re-recorded? You get bands re-recording their old hits, but still in a heavy way. You also get that with where's my warrant? So Warrant Latest and Greatest is kind of the same idea. Bands did this a lot, to get around publishing and see if they could get a hit with, the new version of the song. Motorhead on Parole is a funny one. Like, you never know whether you're supposed to include that as a Motorhead album, because now you're into the semi bootleg situation. It's not really a bootleg, but United Artists says, oh, we're going to put this out, even though you're over, you're going over to bronze or whatever, but we're going to put this out. So you get albums that come out. It often happens with live albums. You think of Black Sabbath Live at Last. Do you include that as a Black Sabbath album because it's unauthorized, semi-authorized? It's authorized by management. It's not authorized by the band, but it's authorized by the management that they're leaving, right? Situation, right? So
that first Tea Party release, right? Because they put out that first independent album, and then they got signed, and then there are newer versions of stuff on the original. So do you count? I mean, we went through that on the Tea Party ranking. Do we count that first one or not? Right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Heart Magazine is a weird situation because you got the whole problem with is this against their will and demos and things they didn't want to put out, and it's a bit of a grab bag sort of album. Peter Gabriel, Passion of Christ. I remember when that came out. Do you include that stuff? Do you include Scratch My Back? Do you include New Blood? We went through that when we ranked Peter Gabriel. And we ruled out some of this stuff.
Yep.
Iomi is a funny one. Iomi, you got Iomi and Hughes. Does he even have a solo career? How does it fit in the solo career? It's got all these different singers on it. We did a Rat ranking the other day, and I was surprised that we kind of came to the conclusion that this wasn't a Rat album. But for ages, I've just played this and considered it just a really good Rat album. I really like this, but it's kind of like demo redone. I can't remember the story exactly, but you put it on and it's just a really good album. But it's not particularly a proper Rat album. You've got the Twisted Sister Still Hungry, the recording of that. Do you include this, or do you just include Stay Hungry? And for that matter, when these bands put together really good compilations and stuff, do these now become part of the catalog or not? Because it's just good quality versions of pre-band songs. You've got Ted Nugent Hunt music. I mean, most people don't know this exists.
I've never heard of it.
It's just the most bizarre thing. What do we got here? Spirit of the Wild, Fredbear Jam Live, 1046, Sunrise Instrumental, Tooth, Fang, and Claw, Fredbear the Original, Earth Tones, I Just Want to Go Hunting, Sunrise Narrated, Cluster Buck, My Bow and Arrow, Great White Buffalo, CD2, The Physics of Spirituality Part 1, 28 minutes, Physics of Spirituality Part 2, 30 minutes, and Hibernation, 16 minutes. So like what in the world is this thing, right? Kate Bush, the director's cut, remix albums. When bands do a remix album of their own stuff, do you include that? It's the same songs kind of redone. Gang of Four, Return the Gift. That's one where they kind of went in and mixed originals with putting in redone versions. You've got really wacky things like Lou Reed Metal Machine music. You've got the Purple album, Coverdale covering himself, doing the Deep Purple stuff. And I think that's kind of it. So a lot of different sorts of asterisks there. And again, do you include them in the catalog or not?
Yeah, that's always the question. All right, so from there, let's go to this category of should it have been a solo album, right? But instead they call it the band album, right? So, we've already mentioned this one kind of fits into a couple categories. Obviously, the Tony Iommi, the 7-star, right? Originally supposed to be a Tony solo album. The label intervened and said, well, no, it's got to be Black Sabbath. We'll do Black Sabbath featuring Tony Iommi because, of course, no other members in the band. So there's that. You've got this album. Where is it? So we got Traffic Far From Home, which came out, like 20 years after the band broke up. This is just in time for the Woodstock reunion thing. It's basically a Steve Winwood solo album with Jim Capaldi on a few tracks, but they decided to call it Traffic. It even sounds like a Steve Winwood solo album. You've got Megadeth, The System Has Failed. Again, Dave Mustaine and a whole cast of characters showing up. Basically could have been a Mustaine solo album, but again, who's going to buy that over a Megadeth album? You got David, this is kind of like the Tony Iommi thing, David Coverdale and Whitesnake. So this is technically after he broke Whitesnake up. Now let's do another album. I want it to be a solo album, but we'll tag the Whitesnake name on it. And it basically doesn't really sound all that much like a Whitesnake album, at least in the original mix. The new mix that they put out a year or so ago actually beefs it up, and it does sound like a Whitesnake album. But yeah, Restless Heart, I mean, it's good for what it is.
So does that mean David Coverdale's on it twice because it's him and Whitesnake? It's ridiculous, right?
Basically, yes. Basically.
Yeah.
Because one sounds
I hate when they do that. Yeah.
Because when you listen to them both back to back, they sound really different. It's the same songs, but it's amazing how a different mix can change the kind of the scale a little bit. So this original version sounds like a light melodic Coverdale album. It's kind of bluesy, kind of mellow. And then you listen to the remix, it's like, whoa, that sounds like a Whitesnake album. So there you have it. Endless Wire by The Who. It's Pete Townsend plays almost all the instruments on it. You got Roger on vocals, of course, but it's it does it really sound like a Who album? Is it a Who album when you've got Pete writing everything, doing vocals, playing almost every instrument, and Roger singing, and then all these other people that appear on a track or two here or there? I don't know. Yep. To me, doesn't quite sound like a full Who album. You've got Pink Floyd, right? The Endless River. I don't really even know what this is. I remember when this first came out, I was like, oh, I was all excited to get a new Pink Floyd album. And it's basically a collection of odds and sods, and it's all Gilmore, and you don't even really know, who's doing what on here. It's kind of cold sounding. So yeah, who knows? You got April Wine, Forever for Now, right? It's latter period stuff. There you go.
Yeah, this was supposed to be a Miles solo album, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even that sounds very different from what they normally do.
Yeah.
What was the original year of that, Martin?
77, I believe.
77. Okay.
76. 76.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's Twisted Sister, Love Is for Suckers.
Supposed to be a D. Yeah.
And I think that's all we got for this category. Yeah, I'm sure there's others, but yeah.
Yeah, and I also think about the whole Slash. There's one Slash album. There's Slash's Snake Pit, and then there's Slash featuring Miles Kennedy and the Conspirators. If you're gonna do a Slash solo discography, do you include all that stuff?
Yeah.
It's basically 3 different bands. But yeah, it's not the only one we had. Yeah, I think that's basically it. So again, the whole idea here, there's actually another April Wine. There's Walking into Fire, I believe. Well, actually, yeah, we'll leave that for another category. But yeah, this whole thing with the whole solo situation, generally speaking, they've got a bunch of session guys on there anyways, so it's not really a band album, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
All right, short category. I didn't pull too many copies, different examples of this, but do you include these Christmas albums, right? We've got Halford, with the whole winter songs thing. We've got Christmas Time Again by Lynyrd Skynyrd, and there is a Blackmore's Night one, right, with winter carols. It's funny. Blackmore's Night and Halford want to call them winter songs and winter carols, right? To be a little pagan about the whole thing, right? They want to downplay the Christianity part of it, right? And then Twisted Sister with the whole Twisted Christmas idea. I'm sure there's many other ones. There's obviously many of these in the pop situation, but again, you're into the whole idea of when you're covering things and you didn't write the songs, generally speaking, are they really part of the catalog?
Yeah, and then you have some where, like, I think there's one that Heart did where they do a lot of original holiday music. And saying, do you count that? The Jethro Tull one is very notable because it's mostly all original stuff, but it's like reworkings of old Jethro Tull kind of sort of holiday and seasonal favorites. But a lot of people really do count that, in the catalog. The Skynyrd one, Christmas Time Again. They do their own original Christmas songs on there. But then again, do you really count it as a Skynyrd album? Because there's like a Charlie Daniels song on there, a 38 Specials on there. It's like this kind of like whole Southern rock community doing a holiday thing. Yeah, I don't know. It's what do you do with stuff like that?
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. We're doing CDs all over the place. Next category. But they normally don't do this sort of thing, or do they? Right. So it's like half the time we don't even know what to call these. So yeah, this is an example of a band doing an album that just kind of really deviates from the formula. Not all that different from the other category we did, but here it's not just about the music sounds completely different. It's just the kind of the way they make the album is just really different. So we've got Yes, Magnification, which is a studio album with an orchestra and no keyboards. Like, how do you not have a keyboard player on a Yes album, right? Isn't like that the biggest part of Yes? Very odd. We've got Kim Mitchell, The Big Fantasize, which, Kim Mitchell, you think big guitars and, loud, melodic rock and roll. And here it's all light and acoustic and gentle and everything like that. You've got UFO, the Salentino Cuts, covers album doing Purple and, covers albums in general. So they're doing, and that's like the similarity to like Rush's Feedback and the Purple covers collection that came out recently, is that what they're doing are covers of like all the same songs that everybody does. And it's just like, can't they just do a covers album if they're going to do something like this and do songs that we wouldn't normally associate with everybody else doing covers? So there's that. Uh, Stay on that for a minute because there's lots of cover stuff coming up. We've got Deep Purple Concerto for a group and orchestra, which is basically this big grand idea from John Lord. Let's get a orchestra together to make this grand concept happen, and we'll bring the Purple guys in too, and we'll call it a Deep Purple album. Is it really right? It's not what they normally do. We've got Van de Graaff Generator, Alt, which is all instrumental songs with just a trio of Hamill, Banton, and Evans, and no David Jackson, so there's no sax on this. And it's like, well, how could you ever do a Van de Graaff Generator album without Peter Hamill vocals? Because it'd be the main focus of the band. So kind of a strange decision there. You've got Rolling Stones, Blue and Lonesome. Same thing with Aerosmith, Honkin' on Bobo. Both bands saying we're going to get back to basics. And what do? They go out and do old blues covers, right? Which is very strange, right? To do something late in the career like that. But again, is the well run dry? Let's just do some covers of old blues stuff because that's what we grew up on, right? We'll go back to the beginning. So who knows? Yeah. Am I leaving any out? I don't think so. Okay, yeah, that's that category.
Yeah, and on the whole covers thing, of course, you got that whole Rod Stewart Great American Songbook thing going on. But
yeah.
It's funny, in our typing we had Endless River in here, Pink Floyd. And I think the most annoying album on this entire list out of all these categories is that Endless River thing. It's like, man, I can't believe we have to include this thing in the Pink Floyd catalog, right? Yeah. Just this instrumental ambient thing.
Boring beyond belief. Like, what did David really think that this was going to capture the attention of the Pink Floyd masses? And people gobbled it up, right? But I bought it, and then I was just like, what is this? It's just I don't know if I will ever need to listen to that again because there's really nothing. It's just,
and you're really annoyed at them using the name because it's not so much that it sullies the name, but it just makes for a real mess, right? It's just not a Pink Floyd album. And yeah, the same thing with Blue and Lonesome and Honkin' on Bobo. It's like if you're forced to include those in the catalog, what silently is happening is like you're forcing yourself or whoever the gods of making your show are forcing you to take these songs seriously.
Yeah,
where they are essentially covers in that, and it's kind of a phoned in thing. They really didn't have to do much to put this thing together. They just had to learn the songs and play them. They didn't have to write them. So that's really annoying. And
the argument too, as far as the Stones go, is like you could make the argument that, well, we don't think twice about counting all those early '60s albums when, in a sense, so much of that stuff was covers too. So why do we judge the latter period stuff so harshly, right? So I could see both sides, right?
Yeah. And the crazy thing is, Deep Purple and UFO, if there's no more records from either of those bands, they end on this really bad covers album, right?
Yeah.
It's like, and UFO, it's like, albums, covers album at the end, right? Yeah. And literally they are very much signaling there's going to be no more UFO albums, right?
Yeah, so that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, crazy. Okay, so next category is and this is definitely very materially annoying because every time I have to write a book on these bands, I have to sit there and go through the whole thought process and debate. What do I include? What do I call these things? Case in point, I just had that AC/DC book come out, AC/DC at 50. That one, not so much. It was more like AC/DC album by album. I had to sit down with the editor and say, oh, well, what are we going to call High Voltage? What are we going to call Dirty Deeds and all that, right? So I'll leave this one aside for a second. So basically, the big problem is, AC/DC catalog, for the large cultural context, this is what is High Voltage, this album here, which is a compilation of a bunch of the best stuff from the early stuff. But you have this not great version of High Voltage, their debut album, basically their worst album. It's really the only one before they get a sound. I mean, the sound evolves a little over time, but this one is really pre their sound. That's what the back cover looks like. But then you've also got, you've got TNT, which doesn't exist as a named AC/DC album in non Australian territories. But this is one where some of the songs get used elsewhere, and then of course you've got the bona fide AC/DC Dirty Deeds. I mean, Australian Dirty Deeds. And then you've got the one that comes out between Back in Black and For Those About to Rock That Annoys Everybody, which is a different track listing, right? So this annoyed the band, it annoyed management and all that sort of thing, but it sold massive.
Yeah, I was gonna say it sold millions.
Yeah, it did great, and they had hits off it. But so that is a definite, you're putting together your ranking show and you don't know what to include. The same thing happened for another one of my favorite Australian bands. You've got the first Angels album, which is not all that great, but some of this stuff gets picked up later. But then the main thing that happens is this is a bona fide, amazing Angels album from Australia, Gatefold. There's good old Doc Neeson in there. So great album, but the splash they made in North America was with this from Australia, which turns into this from North America, right? And I remember this was a pretty big album. There was a lot of excitement about this band. Just like the Thinking Man's AC/DC, like a cool AC/DC sound. They're from Australia, Albert Productions, all that stuff. So yeah, there's your Angels Face to Face, and they had to change the name to Angel City, and the back covers are actually kind of similar. So, and then it actually continues on where you've got Dark Room, and this is one of my favorite albums of all time. This is the follow-up to Face to Face. So this is 1980 in North America, and the Australian version has slightly different picture of the eyes and a quite a different track listing. So there you go. And finally, in this one, where I'm going through this now on a project where it's like, do you call the Judas Priest album Killing Machine or Hellbent for Leather? And Hellbent for Leather's got the one extra song, very annoying, right? Yep. If you call it Killing Machine, you're being more legitimate to the original intention sort of thing. But then people think basically 75% of the world thinks of it as Hellbent for Leather with Green Manalishi. So that's the chopped up albums category.
Okay, cool. All right.
Oh, actually left one out. White Snake, David Coverdale's White Snake, right? David Coverdale's White Snake, Snake Bite, right?
Yes.
Because us as kids, that's the first thing we ever saw. I didn't have that goofy little English EP. I walked into the record store in Trail, BC, and pulled out a full-length album, and it had a combination of that EP and some David Coverdale solo songs on it that made up a Whitesnake album. So for years in my head, I didn't think of Trouble as the first Whitesnake album forever. I thought of this as the first album.
Yeah. I wonder if that was his idea, if that was a record label kind of creation there. I don't know.
Yeah, not sure. No.
I don't know. All right. How about posthumous albums, right? So these albums that came out after the artist was dead or the band was no more, and that sort of thing. And there's lots of examples of these. The first one, of course, is Queen Made in Heaven, right? So this came out, Martin, what, 2 years after Freddie died? I'm trying to remember exactly. Was that 94?
Yeah, not sure. And very stylistically different too, right?
Yeah, it's just mellow and kind of somber, and they apparently these were either leftovers from the Innuendo album and stuff they were working on shortly thereafter, and so they had all these vocal tracks from Freddie, and they kind of pieced them together, and it's not very guitar-y, and there's lots of keyboards, and I remember buying that and thinking, oh, cool, this unearthed recording that they were working on before Freddie died. And I'm like, the whole thing just sounds really cold and dreary and patched together. And man, do you include that, right? It's like, when you do a ranking, it's very hard.
It's almost like reflecting on life songs, celebration of life songs you play at a funeral. Yeah. It's just all very piano-y and weird.
I know they did it as a tribute to him, but it comes across a little on the creepy side.
Yeah.
You got the Sex Pistols, The Great Rock and Roll Swindle. All right. Sure, Martin's got a copy of that. Hold up.
Just a double with odds and sods, and the weird thing on here is it's got a song where they're auditioning lead singers to replace Johnny Rotten. It's really bizarre. Solo material. It's a double album, which is kind of cool, right? But some people consider it the second Sex Pistols album, or
Right,
the
because you never
only.
really
I mean,
got that second one. Yeah.
yeah, it's the only other one kind of thing, and
Yeah.
it's got some good, really good stuff on it. But yeah, obviously it doesn't really count. So
There's April Wine, Walking Through the Fire, right? So which came out in the mid '90s, and here basically
80s,
released
mid
a year
80s.
later, and the band is basically no more at that point.
Yeah.
And you just really got Miles Goodwin and Brian Greenaway and a bunch of other studio cats on the album. So
Yeah.
again, kind of bizarre that something like that would come out. Again, it was held up a little bit, but comes out after the band is already done. Seen that quite a bit. Kind of similar is Let It Be by the Beatles, right? Very fine album, but by the time they actually released this, they were done, right? And then you've got the original release, and then this kind of the remix here, right? So now you got multiple releases, and probably the poster child for these albums that came out after they were gone was Jimi Hendrix. And there's so many. I have a shit ton of these albums, and again, when you're doing like a Hendrix ranking, or you're talking about Hendrix's greatest albums, nobody ever mentions these because you really only have the first 3 studio albums. Then you got a million live albums, and now you got all these kind of cobbled together things. I mean, here's just a blues and what's this one called, the Rays of the New Rising Sun, because he had so much stuff that he recorded that was just sitting in the vaults, that he was constantly recording stuff in the studio. But you have to wonder, like, if you're going to take a look at all of these studio recordings post his death, which ones are the most legit? Are any of them legit, right? I know some people have a fondness for the ones that came immediately afterwards. So that's like Cry of Love, Rainbow Bridge, War Hero. So that's 71, 72. And then there's Crash Landing a couple of years later. But like, because those were kind of dodgy, and a lot of people were very skeptical, a lot of that stuff that was released on those albums also show up on a lot of these other albums, and there's like a ton of them. I'll rattle off a bunch: Cry of Love, Rainbow Bridge, War Heroes, Loose Ends, Crash Landing, Midnight Lightning, Nine to the Universe, Voodoo Soup, First Rays of the New Rising Sun, South Saturn Delta, Valleys of Neptune, People, Hell, and Angels, and Both Sides of the Sky. So that last one was 2018. So they're still putting these things out, and a lot of times they're similar songs or taken from different sessions. They're alternate versions, different people playing on them. I mean, it's just. And I keep buying them, right? So in hopes that one of them will have some unearthed gem that I've never heard before. So yeah, there's a ton of these sort of things that are out there. And we probably scratch the surface with some of the other artists where they've done this sort of thing. Miles Davis is another one that comes to mind too for the jazz folks. So
Badlands Dusk, right?
yes.
I mean, that's kind of a mix of a demo-y. It's actually quite well put together, but it's just
it's
not
really good.
quite there. So you don't know whether you're supposed to include it or not.
Yep.
There's the odd situation of Voivod being able to use some of Piggy's riffs later on, right?
Yep.
Which is kind of interesting. So the philosophical question there is, obviously they're great Voivod albums. They're all great, but and they were buddies, and this is what Piggy would have wanted and stuff. But the funny thing is like, does it turn out to be an album? You don't know. It's Piggy's not there to make the album, right? So you don't know if the album is literally becoming an album of the Voivod lineup. That is, this is the lineup on the album, but the thought process of Piggy isn't there in the making of the actual album, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting that.
And one band we didn't mention who kind of fits in a couple of these categories too, and depending on your opinion, right? So in name only is this really a Yes album? Can it be a Yes album without Rick Wakeman and without John Anderson? Don't know. On the same token, is this really a Yes album without Steve Howe? Right?
Yeah.
Don't know. Yeah. Is this really a Yes album? Because it's like a mishmash of all guys who've been in the band, half of whom don't even appear on the same tracks, and there's all these studio musicians, right? But they did the big tour together, so they put this out. It's like, I don't know. So that's a little on the sketchy side too. But for me, they're all Yes albums. But I know for like purists, they may not be, right? Or people don't take them seriously as a Yes album.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. All right. We got through it, Martin. See, it wasn't that chaotic, I don't think.
Yeah, you're right.
I will say what I like about doing episodes like this is we get to talk about a lot of albums that we don't generally talk about. and we bring up bands that we don't normally talk about. So that's what's kind of
Exactly,
cool about these. So, for those watching, if this seems like we're kind of going off in a million different directions, yeah, we are. But again, we're talking about stuff that like is a little off the beaten path, I think, which is good. So, anyways, next week, of course, is our Q&A show that we're going to be doing. Hopefully you saw the little video promoting that. So if you have a question for Martin and I for next week's show, don't put it in the comments of this video. Go to that other video and put them there, because that's what we'll be looking for them. So till then, Martin, what's new on your end with books and contrarians and podcasts? What do you got coming up?
Well, the big thing is the Blue Oyster Cult panel book came in, and I really like it. I stand by it. I think it's really cool. Where I assembled a panel, we went through every single album in super detail. I learned a lot of cool things. It's not at my site yet because I'm waiting. I'm going to put up the Who book and the Kiss book and the Blue Oyster Cult at my site all at the same time. But I've been sending them out like crazy. You can just email me, martinp@inforamp.net, or just look me up on the on Facebook or whatever. But yeah, that's called Dominance and Submission. But yeah, pretty soon I'll have within a couple weeks I'll have the Kiss book and the Who book. And then yeah, Contrarians, we keep going all the time with the video shows. We just had a good one about terrible metal album covers and albums that flopped and we don't know why. And then every week I've got to do my audio podcast as well, History in 5 Songs with Martin Popoff. So.
Yeah, the Wednesday Contrarian shows are fun, and I was very excited to kind of fill in for you a couple weeks ago and do the one about our favorite album covers from female artists, and you guys have done some cool, quirky ones since then. So I will once again. I promised Grant that I would come back on the Contrarian Wednesdays again soon. So yeah, so that'll be happening. And
cool.
And speaking of, Grant is going to be helping me out on SOT coming up very soon. Grant and I are going to be ranking the catalog of Sly and the Family Stone. Not this week, but next week. So that's coming up. So awesome. Yeah, so Grant's first ever appearance. So see that, my first ever appearance on the Contrarians, and Grant's coming on Sea of Tranquility. So yeah. So lots of fun. So yeah, so what's coming up here? So of course it's Friday, so Ken Golden will be taking Martin's seat in the Zoom, and we'll be going and looking at Ken's picks for the week, new albums that are getting released today that are available, and what else this weekend? Ranking the albums on Sunday. I'll be ranking the catalog of Martin. You ever listen to the band Freedom?
Yes. Don't quite remember them that well. I had to review all this old 70s stuff for when I did that collector's guide to the 70s book. So they had 1, 2, didn't they have 2 and then like a compilation later material? Were they one of those, or just the 2 albums?
They have 5 actually. Yeah, they have 5.
Okay,
but a couple of them are kind of, there's a similar track listings on a couple of them. Yeah, there's technically 5, but yeah.
Through the Years is one of them, right? I think that's the second one, I think.
If one's titled Freedom, the other one's titled Freedom Through the Years.
Okay.
Kind of strange, yeah.
Cool
band. I mean, it's kind of psychedelic blues rock, right? Very early 70s sounding. And 2 of the guys in the band were in the original incarnation of Procol Harum. That's kind of like what their claim to fame was. So, so I'll be ranking those albums on Sunday. So that's coming up. And then, of course, next week is in the Prog Seat week. So we've got Tuesday night is the Q&A show. So thanks everybody for your questions. We picked that and I think tackled like 15 or 20 of them, something like that. So that'll be on Tuesday. And then UK Connection is next week as well. So we're returning to our melodic rock AOR episode. So we're going to be looking at albums from Uriah Heep, Romeo's Daughter, and Billy Squier. So that's all coming up next week on Saturday. So till then, visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, all together all the damn time. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and click on that notification bell so you get alerted of all our content as it posts. And please do hit the like button before you leave. Also, if you want to check out any of our new Sea of Tranquility stuff, we got all sorts of cool new shirts down in the store, so that link is below. And please do go visit Martin over on the Contrarians, over on this podcast, and martinpopoff.com. So
guess you're not selling any Bill stuff, but anyways.
No, I'm not. We're out of stock, Martin. Sorry. Go Bills. Are you excited for football?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Can't wait. Been watching all the preseason stuff, but only one team's happy at the very end. And I just never feel like, the Bills, as great as they are, it's like, I really don't think they're going to be the team at the end, but anyways, we'll see.
Well, for you still got baseball to be excited about because the Blue Jays are still up there, right? So
they're tanking. They're not doing so well right now. They're falling behind. I think they're behind the Astros in the whole wild card thing. But
yeah, they were close though. They were only a couple games out for a while. Yeah, well, there's still a month to go.
Yeah.
So, you never know.
It's a good record, but I mean, a good record isn't good enough, right? So
Yeah,
Like you were saying last year. I mean, that was just horrendous. It was the Mets, right? Yeah. I mean, just like I say, only one team's happy at the very end, right? There's disappointments coming somewhere for most people.
right.
So
Right. You win 101 games and then you lose in the first round. And it's just like the years of disappointment, right? No matter how many games you
yeah,
won and how, yeah, yeah, that's sports though, man. That's why I don't invest myself into too many sports. That's why baseball and boxing is really all I follow, and everything else. I'm just like, I don't have the space for it. I just really don't. So
I
it's too
think
much
that's what happened to the Jays last year, right? Didn't they play the one playoff game to maybe get in, and then they lost it and
They
they're gone,
lost.
right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
I will say though, I'm pretty excited that Seattle is doing well because I always hate these like long suffering franchises because
Yeah.
I follow one of them. But it's kind of cool to see like Seattle, who was one of the expansion teams back when the Blue Jays came on board, and to see them finally having a really, really great year. And, hopefully they go far, right? And they've just come on so strong this year. So we'll see. We'll see. Well, anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. For Martin, I am Pete. Have a good weekend, and we'll see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.